This is the Holy Gospel according to Matthew, the 16th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, God forbid it, Lord. This must never happen to you. But Jesus turned and said to Peter, Get behind me, Satan. You are a stumbling block to me, for you are setting your mind not on divine things, but on human things. Then Jesus told his disciples, If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit them if they gain the whole world but forfeit their life? Or what will they give in return for their life? For the Son of Man is to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay everyone for what he has done. Truly I tell you, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Well, there's this classic scene in the movie Jaws. Maybe you remember it. It's partway through the movie, once the main characters are out on the water hunting for the shark who's been terrorizing the New England coast. Seeking to attract the shark so they can kill it, one of the characters, Sheriff Brody, is throwing chummy fish guts into the water off the back of the boat. That's when the shark suddenly lurches out of the water, surprising Brody. It's the first time that he's actually seen the massive beast, and it's just an arm's length away. Well, he jolts backward to his feet, backs slowly away, stiff with shock, and with wild eyes staring off the back of the boat, he mutters to the captain, You're going to need a bigger boat. It's this iconic line, right? You're going to need a bigger boat. It's his way of saying this shark, this task, is so much bigger than we thought. We may have underestimated what this is going to take. In today's gospel reading, Jesus and the disciples have a "you're going to need a bigger boat" moment. That's not the exact wording Jesus uses. He talks about suffering and dying, about taking up your cross, losing your life. But this was just his way of saying, this task of being my disciple is much bigger than you thought. You may have underestimated what this is going to take. Well, that's the upshot of Jesus' words. And what Jesus says here in Matthew 16 is actually the second part of the conversation. Part one is what we heard last Sunday in worship when Jesus asked the disciples, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Christ." In part two, Jesus tells the disciples what it's going to mean for him to be the Messiah, the chosen one of God, namely, going to suffer, die, and rise. Here's what Jesus says. From that time on, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and chief priests and scribes, and be killed, and on the third day be raised. This wasn't what the disciples were expecting. This certainly isn't what Peter had in mind when he declared Jesus Messiah. I'm not sure exactly where they thought this journey with Jesus was leading. Maybe some more teaching, some more miracles, a little fame, a little glory, but not suffering, not being killed. And yet, Jesus says that is where he is going. He is headed to Jerusalem, into the very jaws of controversy and tribulation. Well, if that isn't troubling enough, Jesus also says that being his disciple will mean doing the same. If any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. For those who want to save their life will lose it, and those who lose their life for my sake will find it. Peter was put off by the thought of Jesus going to suffer, die, and rise. The rest were surely astounded by the thought of taking up a cross and losing their life. But Jesus was making it clear to them, making it clear to us. You have underestimated what this is going to take. This task of being my disciple is so much bigger than you thought. You're going to need a bigger boat. What we need is, in fact, a bigger vision, a more honest understanding about what it means to be a disciple of Jesus. We must confess that too many times we have worn the name Christian as if it was a small thing or required little of us. We have assumed that belonging to Jesus meant only good things and have avoided the truth that following Jesus also means difficult things. So let us allow these words of Jesus today to set us aright again. Our lives are to be modeled after the one who went to suffer, die, and rise. It is not the path of glory we seek to follow, but the way of the cross. It is not fame that we strive for, but faithfulness to Jesus. Giving up control, giving to others, giving away our lives for his sake. The good news is that Jesus has saved us and freed us for this life of faith. Jesus showed that he must do these things for our sake. And then he did them. He didn't avoid the terrorizing depths of the world's brokenness. He dove right in. This past week, we have seen stories of lives given in service for others through the tales of heroism and sacrifice amidst the floods in Texas. Disasters sometimes bring out the best in humanity, and this disaster has had its share of humble service born out of chaos. Though there were hundreds of heartening stories, some will probably never know. The one that comes to mind for me is the story of the Cajun Navy. These were boaters from Louisiana and all over who came to Texas to find and rescue people trapped from storm waters in their own boats. The Cajun Navy, these were people who had experienced their own disasters in the past in Louisiana and elsewhere. You see, they knew the dangers of floodwaters and the sacrifice it took to face them. And yet they came. The first group arrived and put their boats in on Monday morning around 3 a.m., I read. And as far as I know, many are still out there. Have you seen the pictures? Strangers from diverse backgrounds, people who might not have a lot in common in normal times, were nonetheless tossed together by a truth that runs deep. That we need each other. And that love, which is God's way in the world, requires giving and sacrifice. If you want to save your life, lose it, Jesus says. If you want to save a life, give your own. That was the way of Jesus. And it's the way, the truth, the life that Jesus invites all his disciples to follow. A life of taking the gifts God has given us and then giving them away. Maybe it makes more sense in times such as these, but it's always God's call. If you have money, you use your money in Christ-like ways, ways that bring hope and restoration to a broken world. If you have a voice, you use your voice, denying yourself and lifting up others in prayer and supplication. If you have a boat, you use your boat to rescue all that you can. And if you have a life, you use your life in Jesus-like ways. Amen.